Take this one.
Just turn the lights and you can bounce them up on the wall.
What's this
Here,
for?
why don't you go sit
Leave that
down?
alone.
No, he's just doing this.
Oh, great. That looks great. How long have you lived in this house here, Grandma?
37 years.
Yeah. And,
And we've done a lot.
oh yeah, I remember the remodeling that was done back then.
Yeah.
Where were you living before then?
We were living on in Northeast Portland on 14th and Ainsworth. We lived there 5 years, and before there we lived on 24th and Going. And we lived in that house 5 years, and when we decided to move, your mom stood at the door and cried. She thought she was leaving all of her friends, but she wasn't. I said they'd all be there at the other school, just the other end of Vernon School. But it was a nice neighborhood.
What were your parents' names?
Their names?
Yeah, your parents' names.
John and Elizabeth Walker.
How many kids were in your family?
Well, 12. And my dad always told people that he had $1 million. He was referring to his children as being, no, he said he had 12 million, that was it. That each one was worth $1 million to him.
Where did you live then?
We lived on Northeast 11th Avenue. When my folks came to this country, they moved into a house on 11th and Fremont. And that got too small, they moved up to 11th and Beach. Then that got too small, and they moved up to 11th and Shaver. And that's when they lived there the rest of their life, passed away.
Where'd they come from?
They came from Russia,
From Russia.
and their ancestors came from Germany.
That's an interesting story, how the Tsar or something, the princess.
They came through, the Germans migrated to Russia through Catherine the Great, when she married, I don't know, she married the Tsar or what. And that was one of the agreements, that they were to allow these German people to come there. And they were of various trades, because they were good trade people, good farmers and that. And the Russian people weren't necessarily noted for that. Grandpa could tell you more about it. He really, remembers more about it than I do.
Well, I'd like to come back and talk to him when he's feeling better, maybe next week sometime.
Yeah, because he,
What was the name of the family, your family back in Russia or Germany?
it was Walker, but it was in German would be pronounced Walker.
And why was it called Walker? Was that their particular trade, they were walkers?
Well, in German, the word Walker really is you're awake. Now, usually they said the people were named after the trade that they were following, but it wasn't so in this case, because Grandpa's folks, Gerlach, which is quite common in Germany. In fact, there was a big shipyard during World War II in Germany by Gerlachs, owned by Gerlach. But Grandpa's family were cabinet makers. His grandfather was a cabinet maker, his father was a cabinet maker, and Grandpa, followed too. In fact, I think he has still a few tools in the basement that his father had brought with him from Russia. And my own grandfather, Walker, which some say Wacker, W-A-C-K-E-R, was what would have been in this country a constable. He used to, as we were told, transfer some prisoners, for when, as we would have cities or something like that, they had little colonies really to another. And my grandmother said there were times when he would bring these prisoners home, in between, and she'd have to feed them. And it was he was quite a guy, I'd say.
That was in Portland?
No, that was in Russia.
Oh, in Russia.
That was my father's father.
You know what year they came over to this country?
My folks
roughly?
came over in 1904, and they were sent money by my mother's folks, whose name was Weitzel. They were already over here, and the money arrived when they got it in Russia. It came to the name of Walker, Walker, and that's how we, all translated. So when my father got his citizenship papers, he had that name, put on legally. So some of our relatives go by the name of Walker, and some go by the name of Wacker.
Oh, I know there's some whackers in Portland even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think originally they're all from the same, German colony. And they all followed each other, and as I have to laugh because one lady said her daughters were teasing her because she said that those people were all graft dodgers. See, they were, when the German people went into Russia, an agreement was made that they would not have to serve in the Russian army the first 100 years. But Russia did not stick to that agreement, and after 50 years, they they drafted the German people too. But my grandfather, White, so who was my mother's father, did not have to serve in the army because he was an only son. And Grandpa Walker, though, was quite military-minded. In fact, to his dying day, he paraded like a soldier. It was really, yeah.
Did they spoke German and Russian?
They spoke, yes, pardon me, they did speak German. In fact, they stuck to themselves. They had their own colonies there.
Mm-hmm.
And the only ones that they did learn the Russian, but most of them didn't go to the Russian schools. They had their German schools and their German churches. However, my father was sponsored by his uncle to go to a Russian school, and the uncle didn't have any children, so he was allowed to sponsor somebody. Therefore, my father got a good education in Russian. It was equivalent to high school here, and well, I don't know what I was going to say about that. I've kind of forgotten.
Well, I was leading to, you spoke English as well as Russian and German when you were talking with your parents?
When, after we got over here, then my dad, of course, learned English, and Mama stayed home and raised children, so she didn't get to do that much. But Dad went to school, then to get his citizenship papers, he had to, learn the American, as we called it. So we children would talk, they would talk German to us, and we would answer in English. And we went, the first few years of our lives, we went to an English church. But then later on, one of the brethren from a church came and asked the folks if they wouldn't join his church, which was German, so we had to transfer to that. We didn't appreciate that as kids. We didn't like it at all. But we got all of our religion then in German. Therefore, we were bilingual in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And we just kept that up. We always, the folks would talk German, we would answer in English. And finally it got to the point where they had to talk to us in English sometimes too, because we were forgetting our German.
How many brothers and sisters?
And I had, in our family, there were 8 girls and 4 boys.
Wow.
And
Where were you in that?
I was number 5.
Right in the middle.
Right in, almost in the middle,
Almost.
below that. We got to where it was quite a comic. We would go by numbers instead of names. Because, of course, Mama, before she wanted to approach any of us, she'd go through about 4 names before she'd hit the right one. But they say large families are a lot of fun. They're fun, and then they aren't either, because you have your battles too, just like you would. But I guess small families do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was quite an experience. We didn't have a lot of money or anything, but my mother was a good cook. We always had good food, and our clothes were handed down from one to the other. I think I got 2 dresses a year, one for Easter and one for Christmas, because they would have programs in church, and we had to have a new dress for that, and that was it. But we never, as they say, some say they were poor and didn't know it. We were never allowed to go to any kind of a benefit, like at Christmas time. The Elks would have a Christmas tree for poor families and that. And I had cousins where they were allowed to go, Molly and them. And they would go to this Elks party and come home at Christmas time with all these different things that they would get, cards and, well, games, things like that, and oh, I used to envy them and go over there and play with them. But to our folks, that would have been charity, and they would not allow it
Mm-hmm.
at all. So I think my folks did pretty good to raise a family of 12.
What year did you get married in?
Oh, we got married in 1930. Just the start of the Depression. We didn't know the Depression. Grandpa had a job, but no work. You know, every
Uh-huh.
so we'd maybe have a day or two of work a week, and then there'd be no work. And so.
Was that pretty tough? Were people really
Oh, that was very
down
tough.
as much as we
But
thought?
I had a job. I was working all the time. And then finally, when Roosevelt got in, they had the WPA,
Mhm.
where they got 3 weeks' work every 6 weeks. A man could qualify for these 3 weeks' work. Well, that wasn't very much money. By the time you got that, the money was already spent, and it didn't go very far. And then they started the 3 Cs, and Amy's husband, Frank, was a
Mhm.
captain in the 3 Cs. He had a camp up at Vernonia, and out of work. And so Frank got him into this 3 Cs. Then that started things going a little better.
Were Carol and Joan married, or were they born at
That
that
was,
time?
no, Joan was born in 1932, and of course, that's when the Depression really hit us. Then I couldn't work,
Mm-hmm.
and so I had to quit my job. And that's, then in 34 is when Carol was born, and that's when Grandpa was in the 3 Cs. And so Joan and I went up and lived with Ann and George, Jeannie's folks, till Carol was born, and then Grandpa got out of the 3 Cs in 1935. Then things started to look up. Of course, World War II was starting and more work available then.
Oh, yeah.
So I could say we had 7 years of bad luck. And they say every 7 years, something like that happens.
So what were the Joan and Carol like as far as kids? Were they like your typical?
They were very good kids. Your mom,
You don't have to be honest.
your mom never ever sassed me.
Until she got older.
Carol was a little more, aggressive, but
Of course, Mom was the oldest too.
she was the oldest, and I always had a feeling if anything happened to one, it would just absolutely kill the other one. I didn't think they could ever be separated that way. They got along real good, those girls. Of course, I worked a lot, and so I think Joan kind of felt kind of mothery to Carol. I don't know. But they were good girls. And they were good.
Still are.
Hmm. Good students. Your mom, I started her out in music when she was the age of 4.
That's right.
And
Well, you've had a big influence on us as musically, I'm sure. I mean,
Yeah,
I know
well,
I wouldn't have been in music
I
if
really
it hadn't
thought
been
that
for
she
you.
would at some time or other have carried on her music, but she didn't.
Well, we're carrying on for. Have you heard him play the piano?
Yeah,
He doesn't even take lessons. He just
Uh-huh.
goes. It's all in his head.
well, I know, he's like his Aunt Frida. I remember Carol, Carol would not follow through like your mom did. Your mom had to practice, and she did practice, and she gave, she had she played a concerto. I don't know if you know what a concerto is or not, and by memory, for 2 piano, her teacher played the one and she the other, at the age of 10, which, and then at the age of, she was just in the 8th grade in school when she had her own program, and invited her music teacher from the school, and the teacher told some of the other teachers there at school that your mom played some numbers that she didn't learn until she got into college, the concerto and that, so.
What about your musical?
Well,
Where did you get that? Did you go to lessons?
I took lessons, but I was, I played church music,
Uh-huh.
and I accompanied the choir. I played for the church and that.
You've always had a piano or an organ
We
everywhere.
started out with an organ.
Yeah.
That, as I say, our family, we didn't have a lot, but our father always wanted things nice. We had a nice home, and it was kept modern. And we weren't allowed a phonograph in the house, because that was mechanical. We had to learn to do things. So he bought an organ first, and then he bought the piano. And we were given an opportunity to have lessons, whoever wanted it. And I was the only one that stuck with it as long as I did. But I wasn't really musical, I couldn't say. I could read music, but I wasn't like Frida. Now I started her out, and I just taught her the lessons and taught her the notes, that is. And then she went on from that. She can read music, but she plays more by ear, and she has a musical ear. And then we got Carol started on the piano, and couldn't get her to practice or do anything. And it was an awful lot of money. She'd go down there and she'd sit and visit, and so she said
Aunt
she didn't
Carol?
care to practice. She just wanted to be able to play like Aunt Frida. So that's what I think of Brent. He's playing like Aunt Frida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
He doesn't want to
anyway,
practice either.
I enjoy music. It's part of, and Grandpa enjoyed music.
Oh yeah, I
too.
think that's something, I'm sure glad I have music.
Well, Grandpa has a beautiful, beautiful baritone voice.
Mhm.
And he did study for a while with Mr. Hafner. We had a big church choir that was our entertainment when we were children, was going to church every Sunday. And we organized as a youth group, and we would have our parties and put on plays and music and our choir, my goodness, there were 30, 40. This was a German church. It was just really very good. And Grandpa was taking lessons from our choir director, Mr. Hafner, who was very good and very well known in Portland. He was a Swiss, German Swiss. But if Grandpa, would have gone someplace or they had lessons or that, his voice was really operatic. I wish he would sing more now. He said maybe someday he'd sing again. And that's about all I can tell you about us.
Well, you've certainly done a fine job. This tape is probably gonna be around for like 250 years. I was just wondering if you had, seriously,
Is there anything else
if
you'd
there's
like to
anything
say?
that you'd like to address future generations of this family,
Yeah, my kids, Wade's kids,
their kids, and their kids'
and
kids.
their kids.
Well, I wish I could put it in words. My problem is I really didn't have a formal education,
Well, it's a.
so I have a hard time expressing myself. But I think
you've
if
done a good job.
Everything's done better than I
if
did.
you kids live up to the way your own parents did, why you'll have something to be proud of. Both your mom and dad, I think, are very successful. And I wish all of you success in whatever you do. I'm real proud of you from the way things are going on and the way people say around all the children are bad nowadays. I don't feel that way at all. I just feel like there's an awful lot of good in everybody. And if you know how to bring it out, you're very fortunate.
And I have a feeling she's still gonna be here in 250 years to tell them in person,
Because
so.
she can run the machine. Thank you very much. Grandpa, is there anything about your family, your parents, your grandparents, things about their personality that might be carried on? Anything about them, any characteristics of them that were kind of interesting, that were them?
Yeah, the first thing I was gonna say is my dad was a great believer in putting in the bank from 10 to 15% of all the money that he earned. The first thing what he did is checked his money and then put right off the top of his check, he put in 15% of all his money in the bank. And he never touched that. He left it right in the bank. And then the next check, the same thing. And he says if you can put 15% of your money in the bank and leave it there, I mean really leave it there, don't ever draw it out, and live on what you've got, the rest of the money, live on that, see? But don't touch what you put in the bank, and you can live the rest of your life. When you quit working, you can live on that nicely because it works out that way. But if you don't put the money in the bank and leave it there, then you'll eventually go broke and never get any credit for, I mean, you don't get to live, you can't live on, if you don't do that, then you can't figure on living the rest of your life in halfway lecture, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And that's stuck with us, and we always put so much money in the bank. And left it there. See, so we've got it in there now. And we're doing the same thing with our Social Security.
Huh. What about your mother? Was there anything about her that was interesting? She did.
Well, right off the bat, I can't think of right now.
Can I talk?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay, and you didn't tell that what your dad really did was he would buy all these houses and you guys had to work and fix them up. Remember that block of homes?
Yeah, but he did that, he didn't do that with the money that he left the bank. He did that on the money we had
Yeah.
left.
But then, I mean, you had to do it. He would buy all these houses and then rent them out, and he would
Yeah.
build garages on, he'd have 2 garages on one lot, and.
Yeah, and I worked with him all the time
Yeah?
building these garages. And the money that he I mean, the money that we had, we lived on that. And he'd build and buy these homes
Mm-hmm.
and rent them out, and then he'd build these garages and make them more valuable by having every house had a double garage, you know.
And that was rented out to 2 different people, see?
Yeah,
People
Garage-
didn't have 2 cars in
Oh,
those
the
days.
garages, people rented their garage to two
Rented the
people?
garage from him,
Ah.
and, yeah, and then same way with the houses, he had 1, 2, 3, one was even a store that he rented out as a house. You know, it was, then your grandmother had one built, you know, beside
yeah, my
your
grandmother.
father's home.
Of course, my grandmother got married quite often, and what she did is, with the money she made on the homes, I mean, on what she had, she put that in the bank, and she eventually bought a home.
Hmm.
And-
She got married, go what?
Yeah.
Huh.
We used to have a lot of chivalries on her, because every time she got married, Don Wolf, a friend of ours, he'd hire a bunch of kids to chivalry him, and then
What's chivalry?
that,
After a couple got married, they'd be in their house and a big gang would come with
make a
buckets
lot of
and whatnot,
noise.
making a lot of noise, you know, and
Oh.
disrupt the
Came-
honeymooning couple.
And then they'd pay him to
Yeah.
shut up, and then he'd pay him to keep it going, see? So the kids would make money on both ends.
Then also she did was, when she had that house built, that was right next to the homes that your dad had, then she had a little house built in the backyard.
Down, why don't you go over there and sit down, because I can't be switching the camera back and forth like this. Now, why don't you sit over there next to Grandpa, because I got only so much space right here.
Well, anyway, she had these, she had this home that she would rent out to make money,
Mm-hmm.
And then she had a little house in the back, in that
Right.
same lot that she lived in. And, you have to pull them together, Wade, just pull them together, they won't move, just pull the rods over.
Oh, I see. There we go.
You want it dark, or we can, put the blinds,
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Oh, I can
there's
get
a rod on that you can move, that plastic rod is on the blind there.
it. Okay.
You want those closed too?
No, that's fine. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, anyway, I can tell you things about his grandmother too. Remember when she was married to Mr. Sell,
Yeah.
and she wanted a divorce, and she had a fur shawl. Really, it
Mhm.
wasn't anything expensive, rather cheap. But she would take this off about a block before she would get to the courthouse.
Yeah.
So that she would look real poor, you know. And, con artist.
People would feel sorry for her.
Yeah, and she wanted them to feel sorry for her. She had a way of, you know, doing those things. She was a likable person, but well, she came over as a widow with Grandpa's folks, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
she would meet men, and she married about 2 men, didn't she? After that, I remember Sel, and I remember that.
What did she do? Outlive them or divorce them?
Pardon?
Did she divorce them or did she?
Yeah, she divorced him.
Oh, I see.
Hmm. She outlived her first husband, the one that he died in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, and she lived with their folks until she'd marry somebody else, you know. Then she'd come back again. When that was over with, she'd come back again until she had this home built to where she had a place to live by herself.
You were saying some things about your parents. How your father was very neat and tidy and
Yeah.
very
Grandpa,
picky about that.
Grandpa was very particular.
Oh, your grandfather?
No, he was
Oh,
your mother's.
my great grandfather.
My father, yeah. Everything had to be just so, you know. And he was very strict with us. But after my mother died, he came up here one time and he cried and was making sort of apologies for having been so strict with us. But he said he wanted us to be better than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And
He was very proud of his family.
he was proud of his family, but so he didn't want any of us to make any mistakes, you know, so that because he was so strict that he didn't want people to have something on him. And of course now we kind of appreciate it. We didn't at
Oh,
the time.
sure. Oh, yeah. At the time, I'm sure it was pretty
Yeah,
rough.
we envied. I don't know if I told you this before or not, but we envied kids that could go barefooted. And but we weren't allowed to because we may have stepped in a nail or got a sliver or something like that, and then there'd have been a doctor bill.
Mhm.
So you had to be real cautious, and we weren't allowed to go out after dark at night. Our folks always knew where we were home. So
Mhm.
and on Sundays we had to go to church. Dad wasn't religious, but we had to go to church. We went on Sunday morning and Sunday evening. And he spent a lot of time in church himself, but not to listen to the sermon. He'd go down and fix the furnace, stack the furnace, something like that. And he always kept the books of the church too. You know.
Free.
Yeah, he was their bookkeeper for years and years and years until he got up to the age where he felt, it's time for somebody else to take over. And
Well, your parents knew each other, right? Both your parents did?
yes,
Oh, yeah.
they knew each other in Russian, and
Oh, they did? They knew each other in Russia?
yes, and
Oh.
his godfather and my godmother were sister and brother, but then, you know, there's just something that happened.
That's a coincidence.
And I guess they, you know, your folks went to Lutheran church because that's what they had in the old country, but here they didn't, we didn't follow through in the Lutheran religion. But I see when these people came to America, they all got into one little area, the same as your Italians were
Community,
southeast.
yeah.
The German Russians, they were northeast, and they sort of stuck together, you know, and built their churches, and much as they didn't all go to the same church, but they were all in the same denomination really, and we'd have our church programs and go visit the other churches. So you knew, you know, everybody around there,
Mm-hmm.
and
If you got the name, you knew the people.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody was somewhere or other, you know, sponsored somebody else's child. As I say, it's,
My dad was called Red Gerlach because his hair was red.
Hmm.
And when my whiskers grew or my beard, it'd be red.
Oh, I bet that looked funny.
Yeah, it was always red. But my folk were known, and my dad was known as Red Gerlach.
Hmm.
well, my dad told me that your dad was very particular too in his work, you know, that he was a good, you know, cabinet maker in that, I guess,
Yeah, he
builder or
was
whatever, you know,
showcase.
he was doing, yeah. He
Most
was,
showcase.
He was quite particular.
Any man that could be a good showcase man was a good craftsman and a cabinet maker.
What's a showcase?
Well, you know these showcases where they had things on display
Oh,
and the glass
I see, yeah.
around,
Like
you
for
know.
watches and jewelry
Yeah,
and whatever,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
in
a
department
showcase.
stores
I
and
see.
that.
Oh, you made those?
Yeah,
Wow.
and it took a damn good cabinet maker.
Well, in fact, that dining room set we have, your dad worked for that company, and we're kinda under the impression that he may have, you know, even worked on that one, on the, we have redone that ourselves, but it's, you know, it's really what, mahogany or walnut, whatever it is. But anyway, on the bottom of it tells the company it came from, Haywood Wakefield, and your dad had worked for them here in town, so, you know, he could have worked on that, because that is an old set.
He could work for any company. The minute he had to do, all he had to do was go and apply for the job, and he had it.
Mm-hmm.
They knew him.
Yeah, it might.
And my Mr. Kniss, the guy we moved in with, he was a cabinet maker too, but he wasn't a showcase
Mm-hmm.
maker. So my dad used to be boss in some places where Mr. Kniss was working for, see. And the later years, Mr. Kniss and I, who was my godfather, we worked together. And he said when I was born that he was hoping that I'd be a cabinet maker and he could work with me, you know, and show me the trade. But by the time he got to be that way, I was a better cabinet maker than he was. Because my dad was my instructor.
Uh-huh.
And one thing he wanted to make sure that I'd be a good showcase maker. And we had cabinet makers working for us in like at Lutke's and Grand Rapids and places like that. And I worked for $1 a day and as an apprentice, but later I got showcase makers' wages, which was more than cabinet maker wages, see. And I was getting money as a showcase maker, and my godfather, who was wanted to teach me the trade, he was getting less money than I was. But that come over a period of years, you know. But that's in the business.
Do you have those black and white photos handy?
Pardon?
Those photos? Remember
Oh,
last time?
yeah, I've got them over here, but I was looking through them, Wade, and I don't know if there's anything in there that you would have been
How
interested in.
about that one from Hawaii,
No.
Don Ho?
When was this Don Ho picture taken?
That was taken in about 1972, I think, either 71 or 72.
Uh-huh. And what was going on?
It was our anniversary, And he was singing "I Love You Truly."
And I sang to my wife, who was in the audience.
Uh-huh.
They selected, people from the audience and had them come up, and they did crazy things with them, as you saw in the other photo. And then they, had him sing, and Don was, so engrossed with him singing. I guess he didn't expect him to have a voice or something like that.
Oh, really?
Mhm. Now here's a picture, Wade, of me playing the organ. This is our church
Oh,
choir
yeah?
that I told you about.
This in here.
Here's proof that I went to church and played the organ.
And that's you on the organ there on the left.
Yeah, mhm.
How many people were in this? What year was this?
That was, well, it would have had to be in the, that could have been about 35 years ago. So what year would that be? 35 from 82. 7.
See, we had a 90,
That's not the real big one from the other church. This is from the church on 7th and Stanley. That was in 1974, that picture. Now here's that church feed again. That's Grandpa, that's me.
Oh, really?
And my brother Buddy is in the front there. And that particular dinner, your mother played Malaguena. And this was taken in about 1963. There's Grandpa again.
Okay.
He was an usher. I don't know whether you want to learn that.
Yeah. Looks like Scott. You look like Scott.
No, but it isn't. Here's my last family picture, and we're all on there. Here we
The
are.
whole gang, huh?
And here we are, not quite complete. Can you find me?
Yeah, it's you right there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I recognize a lot of these faces.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That was just taken before World War II, before the two boys enlisted in the army then.
Who are these people? Could you,
That's my mother and father, and
Where are they?
sisters and brothers.
12 of you?
which ones are your mother and father?
Yeah.
Those the two in the front there?
And Mom and Dad are in the center,
Okay.
and Margaret's standing right behind them.
And you're on the far left.
Yeah, right next to John.
And who's to the left of you?
Henry.
And who's below you there, next to you?
And that below me is Ellen sitting on the arm of the Davenport, and Amy sitting below her on the Davenport.
And who's next to your left?
And to her left is my father, then my mother.
Right, and who's up above there?
Up above that, next to Henry is Margaret, and next to Margaret is Clarence. Next to Clarence is Lydia, then Buddy, and then Freedom. And Anne is sitting on the arm of the Davenport.
Were you born in Portland, Oregon, Grandpa?
Yes. And I went to Trinity Lutheran. That's a German school for 6 years. And we had 6 years of German in the morning, 4 hours, then 4 hours of English in the afternoon.
What did your parents come from? Europe?
From Russia.
From Russia.
Yeah, and they You see, the Russians, I mean the Germans, they intermarried with each other,
Mm-hmm.
but they wouldn't marry the Russians into the Russian people. They never intermarried with the Russians. They just married with each other.
Oh, I see. So your family, they went over. They were Germans actually that went to Russia because the cabinet maker trade. That
Well, what, Elizabeth? What is that queen?
The what?
What queen was that?
Catherine the Great.
Catherine the Great. Well, she married the Russian Tsar, see, and the only way she'd marry if she could take so many families over with her.
I see. So she took her
So she
the
took,
skilled craftsman.
yeah, and they were farmers and everything else, you know. But the best, the people from that were come from Germany, they were on the farm. They trained the Russians how to grow crops, and that's what she wanted. She wanted people over there that could teach the Russians everything. And for the state, I started out. They paid me $400 a month, and the only reason they didn't pay me any more was because I didn't have the educational background. So what I did is
What was your education background?
grade school.
Oh.
And so I got acquainted with one of the fellows in the office there that paid up the wages, you know, to the employees for the state. And he told me, he says, why don't you take he says, you got a good background in mathematics and all that stuff, because you had to do that, learn that as an apprentice. They had so many years, 6 years of apprenticeship. And in there I got all that background, which you'd get in high school, see. So he says, why don't you take a night class in high school? And you know, that's
Mm-hmm.
80s.
The equivalent to the.
Yeah, equivalent to high school. So I took that, and I took that in three nights. I took that, and then 3 nights, I passed the grades. That was 4 years of high school, see, in 3 nights. So anyway, that way, I got this equivalency and got a raise in wages. And then I took 2 years of college, equivalent to college, but I couldn't go through college because you had to be on campus for the last 2 years, see? So I got that, and when I ended up, instead of $400 a month, I got over $1,000 a month, I think $1,080, something like that. I got equivalency because I got that on the basis of the educational background which I acquired later.
What year was that?
Oh,
General, roughly.
I don't remember. You know him?
What was your father's name?
Henry. And his father's name was Henry.
I see. What, they were all cabinet makers?
Well, they called him Tischler. That's a cabinet maker, but it's a cabinet maker that has the background of a carpenter. So when they work in these different factories and all that stuff, they do carpenter work, but they tie it in with the cabinet maker, In other words, you became, if the work was cabinet work, you were fit for that. And if it was carpenter work, you were fit for that. So that's the way they learned their trade in Russia, so that they could go out and work in the different industries. And when work wasn't very plentiful, they'd go to another area or another country, actually, see. And in that area, they'd be working for different contractors, you know, that worked in various countries. And they learned their language. Like my dad could speak. He could speak Russian, he could speak German, he could speak, he had a background of about, I'd say about 6, 7 different.
Your mother was Russian?
No, she was German.
What was her last name? Or maiden name?
Schott,
How's that spelled?
S-C-H. O-T-T, Schott.
Do you remember your grandparents?
Well, I never, the only people that I actually knew was my grandmother, who came over from Russia here, and she stayed with my folks. And she was the only relative I knew. I never knew any of my other relatives, like my grandparents or a grandfather, or my mother's parents, or her brothers and sisters, and
How many kids were in your family?
8.
And you spoke Russian as well as English, or did
No, we spoke German,
German?
because we were almost forced to speak German. But when I got that German in Trinity Lutheran, that helped, you know. I had 6 years of that. But my brothers and sisters went to the Trinity Lutheran too.
You were pretty active in the union, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I was 17 years as a business representative,
Mm-hmm.
business agent.
Which, any particular local
Cabinet
or
makers.
cabinet makers?
That's local 1120.
Mm-hmm.
And
You worked in the state as well? For the state?
I worked for the state. About, I think, I'm not sure exactly, about 11 years. That's when I lost out. See, I had to run for business agent every year. Later on, they ran every 2 years. But when I was in there, we had to run every year for business agent. Take an election, you know. And then I got appointed as for the state, the girls here.
Oh, yeah.
I got appointed for the state by Commissioner Nielsen, and then I stayed there until I was 65, and after 65 they couldn't keep me anymore.
Because they had to retire people
Yeah.
at 65. I don't think they do that anymore, do they? Maybe they do.
70 now.
Maybe, yeah.
And some areas, some businesses in some areas in some parts of the state, they keep you on as long as they want to.
Seeing how the girls are here and everything, this tape, we're going to be playing this tape for probably hundreds and hundreds of years in our family, and I was wondering if you had anything that you might want to address to our kids or our kids' kids or anything like that, seeing how we're probably going to be watching this tape for, you know, generations and generations to come. Any words of wisdom or advice or...
You guys will someday get married.
Mm-hmm.
That will just take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
My advice is never marry in a woman that is nuts about you. That she really loves you. It doesn't make any difference if you love her or not, because the average man is loyal to his wife, always. But be damn sure she's nuts about you, otherwise it's hell on earth.
I
If
think
she takes advantage of you.
Very well put.
that's very well put. I think I can apply that to some experiences that I've been going through in the last 5 years.
They gotta be nuts about you, don't even consider it.
Yeah, that's true. Well, thank you very much, Grandpa. That was great. Very, very good. Okay, Brett.
Register.
Aunt Joan,
I don't think it's fair.
why didn't you take a chance? Oh, there you are. You're not gonna do that, are you?
He's doing it.
Oh, dear. Grandma,
Would you like to? Mother had to change her.
this you mean?
She wanted to show her Hummel.
Wait a minute.
Well, every picture that comes along.
So, 2 sisters, huh?
Yes.
Which one's the oldest?
Hey, they're my favorite daughters.
Your favorite daughters?
I'm used to this.
We were really Siamese twins.
Yes. You're joined at the head, huh?
We always thought it was like, haven't we, Carol?
Right. We were separated last year. Attached at the head, I think.
Well, if
She
you
got the
really
brain.
want a picture of them, there's on the wall
the
there. The,
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, what was it like growing up together, you two?
What was it like growing up together?
Uh-huh.
Love and
It was
companionship and cooperation.
and another thing, I want to tell you the truth about it.
Uh-huh.
That's not Dad.
Oh, when we had 2 phones, one upstairs and one downstairs. And what they would do, they would call different boyfriends, and they'd say, I'm so-and-so, and then pretty soon they'd switch, and then the other one would take over, you know, and they'd tease the boys that way.
It was always Carol's boyfriend. She had all the boyfriends.
I was just gonna say they were yours.
No, they were Carol's.
They all like you though.
I didn't know that. They sure hid it pretty well.
Grandma, do you have any comments?
None.
None? No comments.
I know it.
How about you two? Any comments?
Oh no.
It's your birthday today?
Yeah. No. No, yesterday.
Yesterday.
Has to stick with that, Sarah.
When's your birthday, Trish?
June 4th.
June 4th? That's Scott's birthday.
I know.
That's amazing.
And,
How'd you plan that?
well, and then Christy was born one day after Brent's birthday.
Is that right?
Only she was born in the Philippines, and if she'd been born over here, it would have been the same day. So Carol and I have 2 children born in the same day. And then there was Wade and Julie, who were long ways away.
Yeah, we're real close. My birthday was tomorrow.
What else do you want to know, Wade?
Well, I just wanted to know what was the depression like?
What was it, how my mother felt when we came along, or?
Just what it was like growing up, going to high school and stuff.
The depression was when we were babies.
Right.
Don't have any idea what it was like. Never suffered a day in my life.
And where'd you go to high school?
Who are you talking to?
Mom?
I went to Jefferson High School. Where else?
And Aunt Carol, where did you go to high school?
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt High.
The school at that time.
Mm-hmm.
No, Jefferson used to win all the athletic tournaments, I believe.
Here it goes.
Or they used to fight it out with Roosevelt.
We only took state in 52.
I thought Jefferson and Grant always had kind of a feud going.
They did. But until Carol went to Roosevelt and I went to Jefferson, then it was Jefferson and Roosevelt.
Well, between the 2 of you.
Yeah.
Oh, say, you know, let's see, Hon, where were you, you went to Jefferson and to Roosevelt both, and you become, what do you call them?
PTA president.
PTA president, both schools, wasn't it?
I didn't become president because I went there, because I didn't go there. So the girls went there.
Well,
I was president for Jefferson High School PTA, then I was president for Roosevelt High School PTA. Then they went to the University of Oregon, so then I got into the Mothers Club there. And I'm still there. How many years later? 30?
and I've got a dad's card from University of Oregon, which I'll keep forever.
Did these two ever get in any trouble or anything like that? Or are they like mischievous or, they're just basically sweet,
Straight A students.
straight A students, the whole bit?
Yeah, I've seen your report cards.
No, but I'll say one thing. I had absolutely no trouble with either one of them.
Look at your daughter.
They were, in my way of thinking, they were more than perfect.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Carol did get a 4.0 in college.
No. Wow.
I didn't.
No, you had 4 points every year, right, Mom?
No.
That's what you told me.
That's the
That's what she
thing.
told me.
I
She
didn't.
must have
You
top fifth
got
in her
to,
class.
both of you got to speak at your graduation,
Oh, that's right.
exercises, and you were out of a class of 450, was it or so? You were fifth
From the top.
from the top.
Not the
I think I
bottom.
was fifth from the bottom.
No.
I'm pretty sure.
That was quite an honor.
I don't think courses were as hard in those days as they are now.
Both of you received, a scholarship award. They weren't large, but each one from the respective school, which is quite an honor.
Since this tape's going to be around for like maybe 500 years, are there any words of advice or wisdom that you can bestow upon future generations of this family? We'll start with Carol first.
Okay, love each other, be kind. That is.
I say vote Democratic.
I've been registered Republican all my life, and 99% of the time I vote Democrat.
Is that right?
Yeah. And Edith Green, who I visited in Washington, D.C., and Senator Morse, who I visited there,
Oh, dear.
they like that because I get all the dope from the Republicans,
Upside down.
but
Oh, because you're a Republican. I
yeah,
see.
but that give me the more reason to vote Democrat.
Who was your favorite president?
We did a going away thing.
Roosevelt,
Yeah,
Franklin Roosevelt,
yeah, he's president a long time.
and I think my second one was Jimmy Carter.
Yeah?
You know,
Grandma, you have any favorite presidents?
Not necessarily. I don't think the president runs the country anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's who his advisors are, and if he gets good help in that way. I did like Roosevelt, what he did for us, because at the time we were, in bad straits. He did a lot for us.
That's okay. I did enough of it.
Okay, I think that's a great.
That's-
Thank